Welcome back to Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from the Indianapolis Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
I'm here. It's like the spooky version of
Boilers After
Boilers
Dark.
Extra. This is Boilers. It's literally Boilers Extra After Dark. We were recording this on Thursday night, way later than we usually record. We're usually Thursday afternoon at the latest, but I had some things going on, some pumpkin carving that had to be attended to, and this is when we can give it to you. So it's right up against Purdue basketball's exhibition trip to Kentucky. Hopefully you're all listening to this Friday ahead of that 6 p.m. tip-off Friday. We're going to talk about basketball in a bit. We're going to start, Sam, with football. You were at Northwestern last Saturday. Obviously, about as disappointing of a performance as you could imagine in a lot of ways. That felt way like a bigger deficit than just 19-0 in a lot of ways. And then obviously spirals into, with the Ryan Brown injury, creating some uncertainty at quarterback for this week, obviously. People I talked to, just things I was hearing today, didn't sound like it was much better than doubtful still for his status on Saturday against Rutgers. That would make Malachi Singleton the starter. And just from what you saw in person, and we talked to Josh Henson on Monday, he said there's not a lot of difference in how they call the offense. How big of a deal is it for Purdue if Ryan Brown can't play Saturday?
I think you wrote about this earlier this week, and I think it's really more about the people surrounding the quarterback than the quarterback. Clearly,
this week.
Yeah.
I don't think that every week. I think that this week.
And if you're to believe what Josh Henson said, this was a quarterback battle between those two going deep into fall camp. I do think that Malachi Singleton gives you a little bit more diversity because of his running ability. Not that Ryan Brown can't run, but Malachi Singleton is the running quarterback out of the two. So you kind of have a little extra set of plays or whatever. But if you're the every down quarterback, I don't know how much you run that kind of a package to get Malachi Singleton running, because if he's the number one quarterback right now, you can't afford to get him banged up. But you're absolutely right. Last week felt like a massive step back after, for weeks we kind of felt like, hey, Purdue improved in this area, getting close here. And it felt like steps constantly in the right direction. And then for Barry Odom to come in the post game and just say they didn't show up, didn't have enthusiasm. And I'm like, how do you show up to a Big Ten road game when you're in the situation you're in that looks winnable and you just, come out flat, a team like that? So it was pretty disappointing all the way around. It was to the point where after the game, I don't know the players who were available, Malachi Singleton and Manny Powell, who had, 20 tackles the other day. So, pretty good performance by him, statistically anyway. But again, missed some tackles as well that don't show up in a box score. It was just flat out kind of embarrassing if you're a Purdue fan, because it felt like with the strides Purdue had made going to Northwestern, and we talked about this stretch, how, winning 2 here, possibly winning 3 here to start this month. And now if you don't win on Saturday against Rutgers, you're probably not going to win again for the rest of the season.
I mean, they show up in the box score. Northwestern rushed for 232 yards. That's where they show up.
It's not a stat attached to any specific player's name.
Correct. I thought maybe one of the best. Well, let's stay on quarterback for just a moment, because I want to make sure people know. I do think that Ryan Brown is the better choice at quarterback. I don't really think there's a quarterback controversy. I tried to ask both Josh Henson and Barry Odom about that on Monday, if they had completely reevaluated that situation. And Barry Odom was the one who said, no, Ryan's our starting quarterback. Like, he dismissed that pretty quickly. And I thought that was kind of important just because of the way that game had gone. And frankly, at that point, as much as we knew, we saw Ryan Brown standing on the sideline with his helmet on. And then we saw him throw, we saw him in practice Monday, like launching balls downfield. And so all of that makes you think like, okay, well, exactly what is the thought process here? How is this going? I thought it was important that, and I don't know that changes no matter what happens on Saturday. If Ryan Brown is just not healthy enough to play Saturday, but is healthy enough to play the week following at Michigan, I think maybe no matter what happens Saturday, I would assume he starts at Michigan. But what we were saying before about why this week is different, Rutgers is an abomination on defense. Like I was trying to quantify this. I wrote something earlier this week. Like Purdue's defense last year, I should have these numbers in front of me. Last year's Purdue defense, which was miserable. I was there, you were there. A lot of you who are listening to this were there. I think it was something like 7.03 yards per play allowed. And Rutgers is somewhere over 8. Like this is a catastrophe of defense. And this is the matchup that this Purdue offense has been looking forward to all season. And this is what they've been, I think, building towards, is a chance to maybe just erupt and really put up a big game on a team. And I don't know that it matters which quarterback it is. I think they're going to score points. The one thing that Josh Henson did say was the passing game they call the same. There is some difference there because there's a height differential. I think you saw that a little bit on Saturday, that Malachi Singleton feels that pressure in a different way than Ryan Brown does sometimes. But in the running game, that's where you'll see a difference. They will call more of just design runs for him. There's things that they trust him with in the run game. Makes me wonder, are they going to have like a Bennett Meredith package ready where he just comes in and does just very basic quarterback stuff? Like it's not specialized in any way. He just comes in and like, does normal quarterback things just to keep that wrinkle in there. But I do think that this is the week where this offense has to like take control of a game. You're playing at home. You're playing a vulnerable opponent. This offensive line needs to go out and dominate the line of scrimmage. This receiving core needs to catch the ball. The running backs need to do what they do. Malachi Singleton needs to stay away from any big mistakes. This is a game that Purdue should score in the 30s, I think, pretty easily.
Yeah, and, Malachi Singleton looked serviceable, but he was in a no-win situation. Purdue was down
absolutely
big, and and Northwestern realizes with a 3-touchdown lead, you're facing a backup quarterback. They're just throwing people at him and putting him in.
But it wasn't that big at the time he came in. It was still only a 3-touchdown game, right? When he came in,
well, it was 13-0 when he came in. I believe.
So it was only a 2-score game when he came in. It just felt bigger than that because the offense was doing absolutely nothing.
Right, and he had a pretty good half passing the ball. Just made some mistakes. Threw one that he probably shouldn't have. Had another one that maybe this goes back to your height arguments. I think Malachi Singleton's probably around 6 feet. Ryan Brown is 6'4", 6'5". He's a lot bigger guy than you would think seeing him on TV versus standing next to him in person. And one of those balls got batted that Singleton threw. So there are some differences, but I do think you're right that teams have moved the ball on the ground, through the air, however they want to against this Rutgers team so far this season. And Purdue has to take advantage of kind of a golden opportunity, because we've talked all year about how tough and challenging the schedule was. And up until the Minnesota game, every opponent they'd played since that Southern Illinois game has had an advantage in the talent and in depth as well, probably. And now you get an opponent that, Rutgers is favored by a point and a half, something like that. But it's, pretty even all told in terms of talent and things of that sort. So this is Purdue's best chance out of the 5 games remaining to get a victory.
That betting line suggests people don't think it's even. That betting line would suggest, because Purdue's getting a few points for being the home team. So right. Las Vegas, at least where it opened at 2.5, saw a gap there. But I also think that some of that is when your starting quarterback is out and they know that he was the starting quarterback who beat out this guy head-to-head. That probably gets factored into where they set that line, not to get too far in the weeds on that sort of thing. I think this is a big week for the Purdue defense. I thought the last 2 weeks, Purdue had the better quarterback. Ryan Brown was a better quarterback than what Minnesota put out there and what Northwestern put out there. I think he is a better quarterback. I think you go look at the numbers, it would tell you the same thing. Ethan Kaliakmanis is probably better than he is at this stage of his career. He's played a lot of Big Ten football. Go look at his numbers this year, the efficiency numbers, yards per play, touchdown to interception ratio. Like it's better. And this Purdue defense that has shown improvement the last 2 weeks, this is kind of a statement week for them. Like, was that real? Can you stop the run and force a good quarterback to have to make tough decisions? Put him where he has to throw in your terms. Like, take the game out of his hands and take control of it. I think this is a week where this defense has to play probably its best game of the year. And it's not because Rutgers is like a juggernaut, but I just don't think you want to get where this offense is right now. As much as I think it can score points, I don't know that I trust it to stay away from mistakes enough that it can win any shootout that it gets into.
Yeah, and Rutgers, very much like Purdue, is in a similar situation, sitting there at 0-4 in the Big Ten, feeling like this is a golden opportunity for us to finally get a victory and get things moving in the right direction. So it's definitely crucial for Purdue to get out to a lead and play with a lead. And they haven't, the Boilermakers haven't done that for 6 weeks. So that's, it kind of changes the entire game when you can kind of dictate it on your terms. And that's something that Northwestern did from the start last week, put together this long drive, scores. Purdue goes 3 and outs. Northwestern gets back another long drive. And by the time Purdue takes its fourth snap of the game on offense, it's the second quarter. And Northwestern had completely kind of put the game in its hands and was controlling how that game was played. And it, as it went on, it just kind of became more and more apparent that Purdue just, was fighting an uphill battle. And it was all because of how that game started, really.
So before we give our predictions, I just kind of want to, let's put this game in context. As we've said all along, like this 3-game stretch was going to be Purdue's opportunity to strike, Purdue's opportunity to get that Big Ten win that has been now elusive for a season and a half. And they're 0-2 out of those 3 games so far. One more shot left. It's at Michigan, a home against Ohio State, at Washington, at home against IU, the last 4 games of the year. I don't know that Purdue can play within a couple touchdowns with any of those teams. So we talked earlier this year, I can't remember what exactly, I think we were just talking about going into that USC game and the idea of the nuance of success, or that it wasn't always binary, right? Like it wasn't always success, fail, win, loss. I kind of think this week that's not true. I think in order for this team to say that it had a successful season, I don't know that they would ever call 3-9 a success. But I think maybe for people for them to say that this season wasn't a failure in some sense, they have to win Saturday. I think that takes that binary thing off the board where you can say, all right, they were better in so many ways as far as the actual product on the field. They did get a Big Ten win. They basically, they played well enough to win another game at Minnesota. Maybe they can be competitive in these last 4 games and not get embarrassed the way they were getting embarrassed in some games last year. Like there are ways that you can start to say that it wasn't a success, but let's not call it a failure. It was a step forward. Do you think you can call it a step forward if you don't win Saturday, or then I suppose pull off a huge shocker in one of the last 4 games?
No, and I did a radio bit on Wednesday, and I kind of said not only does Purdue need a win here, but then it needs to look competent in some of these games where nobody's giving them a puncher's chance, so that you feel like, okay, there were strides made. Not only did Purdue finally end that Big Ten losing streak, which I think is 13 or 14 straight now, something like that. But then you face the big dogs in the conference at the end of the season, and you want to look like you can compete even in small doses against those teams, because right as of right now, I would imagine this roster will look drastically different than it does this year, as it looks drastically different this year than it did last year. So that can't be your model for the long term. But if you're going to bring in some guys through the portal, or if some of the people on campus this weekend that you're recruiting and you want to get verbal commitments from, if you want to woo those guys and get them to commit to your program, you have to show progress, because the lip service was great and buying in was great, especially after 2 games. But kids don't want to commit to a program that goes 1-11 and follows it up with a 2-10 season.
Yeah, I've been having these conversations with people throughout the season, even as recent as last week, just on social media and things. There seems to be now, especially I think, what has happened with Purdue the last 2 weeks, combined with what has happened with IU over the past couple of weeks. Going out to Oregon and winning, giving Curt Cignetti the gross domestic product of Indiana to be their coach for the next few years. Like those things, I think, kind of started to reinforce this idea of, well, Purdue's not serious. Purdue's not spending money. And Curt Cignetti got paid after he won. And we could do a whole pod sometime on the difference of the dynamics between what IU is dealing with and what Purdue is dealing with in this juncture of their histories. But it's not as easy as good players are available in the portal. You just need to go buy them. You just need to pay them to come here, because you're kind of operating in very similar money situations. Purdue has to get such a volume of players every year that it's not like they can overpay for certain things. And when it comes down to, do you want to go to Purdue or do you want to go to, I don't know, pick a team like Illinois or, something like that, where you're assured of going to a bowl game, or you're definitely assured of not going winless in the Big Ten, let alone having like postseason success. Like that, if it gets to the end of this season and you have to look all the way back to September to when you were beating Group of Five and FCS teams, I think that's going to make portal recruiting more difficult. And that's why I think there's some stakes on Saturday, that if you can get a win Saturday, then you can follow it up and maybe you push one of these teams, you put a scare in somebody. Like you go up to Ann Arbor on a Saturday night and things are weird. You go to Washington and you're riled up to beat Ryan Walters for whatever reason. Like, even though most of these guys don't know him, like maybe something like that happens. You know what I'm saying? And you give people, you need to start giving people something, I think, recent, because if all your appeal is every year, if the only thing you're appealing is like, well, a bunch of people just left, so you can definitely play, there has to be an appeal to quality at some point.
Yeah, and the thing I think Purdue has in its favor going into the offseason, we're looking a little bit ahead now versus a year ago, is you have a full year with this staff. Now, if Purdue goes 2-10, I don't anticipate the full staff coming back. That's usually, somebody has to take the fall somewhere. But you have a whole year of recruiting your own high school guys. You have connections you've made and just comfortability with your surroundings. And I think that will help somewhat, but it isn't going to help a whole lot if you can't beat Rutgers at home for your homecoming, facing a team that's, among the Power 4 programs, probably got the worst defense in the bunch.
Last year, I kept bringing up this idea of, okay, if you're expecting better from Purdue, look around this 2 deep, look around the starters, 22 spots. Tell me which of those guys is among the 9 or 10 best players in the Big Ten at his spot. And right now, if I tried to do that, like, who is like, maybe you might want to try to argue one of the linebackers. You might want to try to argue CJ Nunnally, but I mean, to be one of the 10 best pass rushers in the Big Ten right now, with a Big Ten that's like, we got the top 2 teams in the country and is sending a bunch of teams in the top 25 every week. Like, it's a high bar in some ways, but in other ways, it's, if you don't have any players at any position who you can really make that argument for, or you have very few, how can you beat the teams in the top half of the Big Ten? How are you really challenging to get back even into the middle of the Big Ten? And that's where I think the conundrum comes in, because if you are not keeping them here and developing them, then I think, as history has now shown us, there's no guarantee that they're just going to be waiting there in the portal. And then even if they are in the portal, there's no guarantee you're the one that they're going to come play for.
Yeah, and last season, I think Purdue had more top-end talent. It had some of those guys you're talking about. It had a Max Clara, Dylan Thieneman, Will Helt. And there's probably more depth on this year's team, but the results haven't indicated as much. The scores have been more competitive, but still, if you go through a winless season, it's kind of hard to say, like, yeah, we didn't win a Big Ten game, but Purdue looked better in losing, every game of the Big Ten schedule. So
it's not for nothing because of just how rock bottom they had hit. They did have a big lift here, but yes, it also isn't enough. And I don't know, not that anyone in that building would argue that it is. I mean, you can see it. Like, just watch the body language of these of these guys. When Barry Odom comes in, when the players come in, like there's a lot of feeling in that building. I think there's a lot of conviction to be the group that turns this around. I think they're running out of time to say that they did it in 2025, but one of their last chances to get some momentum going is Saturday against Rutgers. So, Sam, what is your prediction for this game?
Well, so I had asked Barry Odom after the Northwestern game, because he's said numerous times this year, winning is hard. And, I know the way to do this, and it's hard and tough and all these phrases. And I said, did you think it was going to be this hard? Like basically saying, did you think you'd have some wins piled up by now? And he kind of danced around it a little bit, but I think honestly, he would have thought Purdue would have a couple of Big Ten victories by this point, and right now it doesn't. But I do think that will change on Saturday. This is the third week in a row I picked Purdue. I'm not picking Purdue the next 4 weeks. I'm just putting that out there now. But I think this is the opportunity that Purdue's been waiting for, to go out there, get ahead, get the ball rolling a little bit early against a bad defense at home, and get the crowd behind you a little bit, and then take advantage of that situation versus trying to come back from being in a deficit early.
And what is that score?
I'm going to say 27-24.
Oh, okay. We're similarly thinking it's going to be a tight one. I want to go back and touch real quick on what you said, because I think in some ways this has probably looked a lot like what Barry Odom might have expected. It's hard to think that you're going to beat the USC's and Notre Dame's and Illinois of the world. They showed that in some ways they could hang with those teams, but beating them was going to be tough. I think what you can't as a coach really predict is the turnovers and the penalties that cost them the Minnesota game, and certainly didn't help them in some of those other games, and were a factor even again last week against Northwestern. I think that's where it wasn't necessarily that it's just, there's just no way to like factor that into your game plan or really how you're envisioning the team is going to be, I think. So I think that has probably been, he has already basically said like that is a lot of why there's such distaste for these last couple of weeks. I'm picking Purdue to win 32-30. I think this might be, there's a very good chance this could be kind of a wild one on Saturday. It's two teams that have some things going for them, but also have real flaws and have some desperation on both sides. And you've got two veteran coaches here, Greg Schiano on the Rutgers side. When I covered Ohio State, there was one year, I think it was the COVID year, Ohio State played Rutgers very early in that season, and Rutgers came into Ohio Stadium and had all sorts of that was Schiano's first year back at Rutgers, and it was all sorts of trick plays and special teams gimmicks and all these things. So I don't know if he has any of that stuff up his sleeve for a matchup like this. He probably doesn't think he needs him for this kind of matchup the way he did for Ohio State, obviously. But I'm just expecting it to be a high-scoring game because I don't trust the Rutgers defense any farther than I can throw it. And I do think this isn't necessarily a week where there's going to be regression for Purdue's defense, but I just think that the competition has regressed these last 2 weeks. I think as far in terms of explosiveness, especially in the passing game, I think that's going to be with Ethan Kalikmanis. I think there's going to be more of that this week. So Purdue's going to have to put up points, but I'm, for the second time in 3 weeks, picking them to do it. I was wrong at Minnesota. You were wrong at Minnesota. We were wrong at Northwestern. But I think they might be able to do it on Saturday. Let's talk about what's going to precede that on Friday. We talked to Matt Painter and several players earlier today in advance of the trip to Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky on Friday for the exhibition opener against number 9 Kentucky. Some personnel things I think we need to discuss here real quick. And the first was the redshirt decisions, which one is in. Riley Burge is going to redshirt. One is still hanging out there. And Matt Painter hasn't said that it would be Antoine West. I assume it would be Antoine West. I don't think they're going to redshirt Omer Mayer at this point. That's really the one that's kind of lingering out there. He said that because he's a true freshman, he can play in the exhibition games. I mean, we were talking to PJ Thompson today, who said that Antoine West is maybe their best on-ball defender, on this roster. So that means something. But I don't know when he'll play. So it's just something to keep an eye on here in the next week or so, because and I think it's an especially tough decision for these guys this year, because everybody wants to play. Nobody likes to redshirt when they're healthy and can play. They're putting in a lot of work. You want to play. And especially you want to be involved in a real way if this team's going to do the kind of things it might be able to do.
And none of us asked Matt Painter about this, but if you are serious, like you believe this team will compete for a national championship, and everybody around this program does, everybody around the country does at this point, you have to keep all options open. If you think Antoine West can help you win a game in the NCAA tournament or something like that, you have to consider, well, his defense is so far ahead of everybody else's. We might need that against an elite opponent at some point. So it's not an easy decision. I don't envy the decision at all, but you also are in a situation where Purdue has built such a roster that now you have to redshirt guys who are really, really good players, or you have to have guys who would be starters at a lot of really good teams playing bit roles for this team. So I guess the puzzle piece here is getting everybody to buy into whatever role that is. And, one guy he mentioned specifically today, Matt Painter mentioned specifically, was Jakari Harris set a goal this season that he wanted to be a starter. And he's probably, as of right now, a guy who's going to play 15 minutes a night off the bench. And that's not the role he wants, but for the betterment of the team, that's the role that he's probably going to at least start the season having. So to get to where this team will start CJ Cox, Oscar Clough, and then Lawyer Smith and Trey Kaufman-Wren, I think is more about, and this is kind of how Matt Painter phrased it, who fits best with those three seniors. That's what really ultimately it came down to. Oscar Clough gives Purdue rebounding that it severely needed last year, which will help this team get out and run. CJ Cox, he did mention CJ Cox is a really good rebounding guard, but also, he's kind of a microwave too at times, and he's another ball handler alongside Braden Smith. So not surprised by those choices. I don't think a lot of people are surprised by those choices, but at least now we know going against Kentucky what that lineup's going to look like with the starting five.
Just to reach back to one point you made on the redshirt thing too. The first one that I encountered really when I was on this beat the first time was the decision on whether to redshirt Ryan Klein as a freshman. And I think in the long run, Matt Painter, that's one of the ones that he wishes maybe he had. You would have had Ryan Klein for yet another year. And especially for a guy who didn't even end up going on to play pro ball or whatever, to have had that extra year at that juncture of his career would have been beneficial. But I also saw that kid at the time go to, I think it was Pittsburgh, and basically win a game, hit several threes and had a huge game off the bench, and was the reason why they got an important road win, I believe, in that season, if I'm remembering all that correctly. I flushed a lot of this stuff out of my brain when I moved to Columbus, and now I'm trying to claw it all back.
That's a similar situation, not the winning the game, but Ryan Smith, I know, was a guy in the past that he said probably should have redshirted him and didn't. And those decisions, Painter talked about this last year, kind of come back and bite you a little bit, after 4 years, where you're like, man, I really wish we didn't, not redshirt this guy to get him a bit role or, a few minutes here or there as a freshman. I'd rather have a whole season of them being 22 years old, coming back with experience. But he said he'd never regretted the decision to redshirt somebody later on. So
he never regretted the decision to redshirt someone. He has very often regretted the decision not to do it. But I think you bring up I think it's a fantastic point that that we've heard so many good things about how Antoine West has played, how every guard, we've only heard good things about how all these guys were playing. That only kind of reinforced how difficult it will be for any of them to get that playing time. As it stands, so the Oscar Clough starting didn't surprise me at all. They got him here to rebound. I think the rebounding that he gives is more critical to the to what this team has to do every night than even what Daniel Jacobson gives you as a rim protector. Although I think that is very important and is an important defensive helper for what they want to do on the perimeter defending the ball. But Clough, I thought, was going to start just because he is so critical from a rebounding standpoint. And that's what they feel like the rebounding that he gives them is going to make them more efficient on offense, because now they'll rebound better. They'll start more fast breaks that way. They're already very efficient in the fast breaks. It's going to kind of, snowball from there. Cox starting, I mean, I think I've gone back and forth. I think, over the summer, I sort of assumed that maybe Omer Meyer was going to come in and Omer Meyer, was going to come in and just slide right into that. And that both Cox and Harris, because I just saw them too similarly, would be the ones jockeying for the minutes behind him. But then we just heard throughout the preseason, there's been a lot of buzz out there about Jakari Harris. And then CJ Cox looked really good at the scrimmage on Saturday, and he is the incumbent. He was the guy who was starting games down the stretch last season. And I don't think that meant everything, but I think it means a little something. You've already seen him be on the floor with most of these other guys, plus Oscar Clough. But you've seen him be on the floor with Smith and Lawyer, and you liked how that looked, and maybe trust your eyes over trust the theory of what it might look like with someone else.
Yeah, and the point that Matt Painter made was in all of our competitive drills, CJ Cox wins. Like all of them. And I wasn't at the scrimmage Saturday, but it sounds like he was on the winning side pretty much every time. So
I think he might have been on the winning side of all periods of both scrimmages they did. I don't know that for sure, but I think that might be true.
I want to say that Chris Foreman said he was 6-0.
I think I think so.
So, and Matt Painter said winning matters, right? So that's kind of, when you're looking for separation, when there's not a lot, you look at little variables like that and say, okay, this is the guy that's going to get the nod right now. Now this is a starting lineup for one exhibition game to start the year. I don't think this is set in stone that this is going to be the starting lineup for the entire year. And it is a starting lineup that could be, could fluctuate depending on opponent and depending on, performance, I guess. But as of right now, that's what you have. And the starting lineup that Purdue ran out there against Creighton a year ago wasn't the starting lineup that ran in the season opener, 2 games later, the regular season opener. So it's a starting point. But the big thing is going to Kentucky, going to a hostile environment and what is going to be the biggest probably preseason college basketball game in a long time from this, 2 top 10 teams and the histories that Kentucky and Purdue have. And you want to go there, you want to develop. You would like to win, but if you don't win, you're not going to blow it out of proportion. It's, Purdue hasn't won since it started doing these marquee exhibition games at Arkansas a couple of years ago, at Creighton last year. So,
yeah, I think, Matt Painter kept bringing up that, you're kind of picking this for the atmosphere and for the program that you're playing more than like looking for a specific kind of matchup, I think. Last year with Creighton and Kalkbrenner, I think that was a little bit in the mix there, right? Like that is why that fit. But they are close with Creighton through Paul Lusk, through other ways. So that matchup always made sense. And I think there's some similar things here. Matt Painter with some connections he has on the Kentucky staff. But because I was trying to ask, hey, like what about like the specific ways that Kentucky is going to challenge you? I think especially defensively, like so just to kind of, we'll each give kind of a thing that we're looking forward to, or keeping an eye on Friday. Like I still want to see the defensive development of this team. That, last year I was doing a thing for something I'm writing before the season where I was sort of charting all the last like 15 NCAA champions in a number of different statistical categories. And if you look at Purdue's offensive categories last year, they're right there in like everything. Like they were national championship caliber. And if you look at their defense, they were like nowhere near. whether that was defensive rebounding, whether that was just pure defensive efficiency. And those things go hand in hand, obviously. It wasn't there. So with Kentucky and, some of the guys that they have, I mean, especially Otega Owe, who is the preseason SEC player of the year and is a very he's got a good mid-range shot, but I think of him as more like a attack off the dribble, slicing downhill kind of guy. Like Purdue wants to be better at stopping dribble penetration. This is the kind of matchup that can really help with that. So I think the rebounding, I trust the Oscar Clough rebounding will be there, and Daniel Jacobson and Kaufman Wren at the 4. I think the rebounding, I don't even know if it's that much of a theory. They're going to be a better rebounding team. I want to see what translates in terms of you're playing a very athletic team on its home floor. How do you contain that? How do you defend that?
Yeah, and I looked this up earlier. Trey Kaufman Wren, who was Purdue's leading rebounder last year at 6.5 per game, ranked, I want to say, either 14th or 18th in the Big Ten Conference. And now you have the guy who, and granted it was at a smaller level, was the second leading rebounder in the country in terms of rebounds per game. So, yeah, Purdue absolutely is going to be a better rebounding team just by that one addition. And then you include Jacobson's return in that as well. I think there's no doubt about that. The thing that I want to see probably most is I want to see Purdue take care of the basketball and not get careless. And, it's harder to do in an exhibition game because you want to make the big play or something like that. But I think that this has to transition into the regular season. The reason they're playing this is so that when Purdue goes to Alabama, it's not shell-shocked for some of the younger players who haven't been in that kind of an atmosphere before. It's, Matt Painter said, people talk about the first road game. And he said, well, make it your second road game, which is why they do these and why these aren't at Mackey Arena against these kind of teams. But, yeah, that's the number one thing. I want to see Purdue because when Purdue doesn't turn the ball over, and this is something that goes back probably for every team, but at least during this run, when Purdue has, I think it's 7 or less turnovers, like they're unbeatable. So that's going to be kind of a marquee stat throughout the season. And when Purdue was beaten last year, it was games where it had 10 turnovers. There were games where it got high into the teens in turnovers, and those are just possessions you don't have. The offense is probably good enough to overcome some of those, but not high numbers. So taking care of the basketball is what I want to see this Purdue team do, not just against Kentucky, but consistently. But it starts with a team like Kentucky that's pretty, pretty good across the board.
But that dated back to the 23-24 team too, right? If they didn't turn the ball over, they couldn't be beaten basically until they ran into UConn, which I think was, that wasn't one they gave away by any means. That was a great team. So yeah, I think that's a great point that if this team, it was still a thing that they struggled with last year. I mean, the Penn State game, the Marquette game, I think that the turnovers were up there. There was definitely some others in Big Ten play that they lost, and turnovers are a big part. So that's one of the ways that I think this guard group being a year older, bringing in Omer Meyer, there's a lot of things that I think tell you that it should be better from that respect, just taking care of the ball. But again, we'll get to see it in practice or not on Friday night. I'll be down at Rupp Arena for that, and then we'll both be back at Ross-Ade Stadium on Saturday for homecoming against Rutgers, and we'll be bringing you Boilers Extra as soon as that one's over. So join us live for that if you would. And with that, I'm Nathan Baird. He's Sam King. We'll talk to you again soon.